Someone attacks a group of people supporting Israeli hostages in Gaza. But we're learning about the man charged with the violence who will face a judge later this afternoon. Plus, the White House says President Trump's tariffs are not going away as China blames the U.S. for violating a truce. And a former so-called MAGA loyalist refuses the pardon she was granted by President Trump. Why the January 6 rioter says her conviction should stand. We start with a look from inside the courtroom in Boulder, Colorado, where we are just moments away from the first appearance by the man suspected in what the FBI is calling a targeted terror attack. Police say 45-year-old Mohamed Soliman used a makeshift flamethrower and another incendiary device to burn 8 people who were holding a weekly remembrance for the Israeli hostages still held by Hamas in Gaza. The FBI says Soliman was allegedly heard shouting "Free Palestine" during the attack. And earlier today, the Justice Department announced it is filing federal hate crime charges. The 8 victims range in age from 52 to 88 years old. One remains in critical condition. CBS News correspondent Jason Allen is following the story in Boulder.
There is a male with a blowtorch setting people on fire.
Fear and chaos captured on this cell phone video as a flamethrowing attack unfolded at a weekly Sunday gathering to support Israeli hostages in Gaza.
One person caught on fire from head to toe, and they were burning up. Their whole body was burning up.
Stay away. It happened on Boulder's Pearl Street Mall. People rushed to douse victims, aged 52 to 88, with water, while the suspect was seen just feet away, yelling anti-Israel comments. Police say 45-year-old Mohamed Soliman used a makeshift flamethrower and bottles filled with flammable liquid.
It is clear that this is a targeted act of violence, and the FBI is investigating this as an act of terrorism.
Homeland Security said Soliman had overstayed his visa and he was in the country illegally.
People are being targeted at Jewish events just by gathering and being Jewish.
Susan Rona of the Anti-Defamation League is concerned about a spike in anti-Semitic violence and says the problem starts with words.
Let's have awareness of the language that's being used and normalized around us that ends up with violence. And let's stop that.
More on this, we want to bring in now retired FBI Assistant Special Agent in Charge, Jeff Harp. And Jeff, from what you've seen so far, tell us a little bit about what you make of what happened with the specifics of this attack. We're talking in terms of coordination and planning. The FBI said today that Soliman had told investigators he had been crafting this plan for a year. Does that surprise you? And how did it not get on anyone's radar for a full year?
Well, so the level of sophistication with some of these simple attacks, it's not very sophisticated. And if you think about it, the least amount of sophistication is much harder to detect. It's sort of, if you look at these things from a lone wolf perspective, these people that operate sometimes in the privacy of their own homes, get radicalized online. It's really hard for the FBI to track some of that because there's freedom of speech choices that are made and everything else. So sophistication, not that great. Planning, it's obvious this is an event that's been planned for some time and ongoing, so they can pick and choose. Unfortunately, it's their choices make it very hard for them to detect this.
And Jeff, federal officials immediately described this attack as an act of terror. So from an investigator's point of view, what will the FBI be looking into now in terms of establishing that it was indeed terrorism? And what goes into classifying something as an act of terror for an incident like this?
Yeah, so there's obviously an international flavor here because the person, what they espoused, what they yelled regarding Palestine, obviously it's targeted towards the hatred of the Jewish people. So there will be a couple things going on here with respect to the investigation federally and locally. Obviously, they're looking at terrorism charges because of the international connection.
Jeff Harp, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
For more, let's bring in Anna Schecter. She is the senior coordinating producer for CBS News' Crime and Public Safety Unit. Anna, you've covered plenty of these high-profile attacks in the past. What can we expect out of this court appearance today?
Well, these initial preliminary hearings are just that, where the suspect, Soliman, will be read the charges. He will be asked if he understands them. Generally, he'll say Yes, so we're so early. This just happened yesterday afternoon. So we don't even know if these are all the charges that are going to be thrown at him. But we're going to see him. We'll see his demeanor. Interesting to see how he comports himself in court at this time, given the nature of the attack. But we also know a lot about him at this time. Especially federal prosecutors have put in the affidavits a lot of details, like the fact that he searched how to make a Molotov cocktail on the internet, but even specifically the platform on YouTube, where he went to buy the materials, the fact that he drove to Boulder essentially to carry this out. So we have a lot of information at this time, which is sometimes that can be unusual, actually.
Especially considering how long he's alleged to have been planning this attack, how much of a treasure trove there is for these investigators to look into. I want to ask you about this. In addition to the state charges, the Justice Department also announced today that it's filing at least one federal hate crime charge. So what stands out to you in that charge? And bring us up to speed on the investigation once they turn in that direction.
Sure. Well, a federal hate crime charge, that is a whole new ball game. So they can throw a lot of resources at that investigation. Basically, generally in a big case, prosecutors want to get the longest sentence that they can, whether it's state or federal. And sometimes the state will actually lead and they'll lean into those state charges. But a hate crime charge, it's a very symbolic charge. And I think in this case, what prosecutors want to do is they want to make this point. We just last week had a shooting outside of a D.C. Jewish museum where 2 people were shot dead. Now, a week later, this happens. You've seen a huge spike in anti-Semitic crimes occurring across the country in recent years. This has really been building up. And so they want to make a big statement, and that's where that hate crime charge comes in.
And on that note, these victims, the people who were attacked, they were part of an organization that has been holding events around the world since the October 7th attack. It doesn't appear right now that there was any special security in place for this particular gathering. Is that a surprise to you, given that this is all happening against the backdrop of what you just mentioned?
Well, in Boulder, this group would gather every week and have a walk. You had a group of primarily older people. And so it doesn't really surprise me that they wouldn't have a security guard going on this, almost like a fun run, but to kind of remind the community about the hostages. And since it's weekly, I suppose, you know, we live in New York City. They could have had a security guard there. The fact that there wasn't one, that might be a little bit surprising, but just the nature of the group, the casual nature of the gathering. The one thing, though, they posted on Facebook the location and the time. And so the suspect might have learned about that online and helped him plan that attack. So, you know, that's something that these types of groups are going to have to grapple with. How much do they put out into the public to tell people, you know, when they're going to meet if they're not going to have security? Now, like a big march where you're expecting hundreds or thousands, security gets ramped up. They've had marches here in New York City. There's NYPD all over the place, intelligence officers, plainclothes officers all over the place. So, but this type of march wasn't that, but I think now there's going to be a rethinking. And, you know, what Jason Allen talked to members of the community, and he told us earlier that everyone that he spoke to said we were worried something like this would happen. So that just tells you kind of the climate. And there is a lot of fear in the Jewish community across the United States right now.
But still, a weekend gathering where everyone comes together once a week, it's not something that they necessarily would think about something like this happening.
Exactly right.
Just for something in the neighborhood. Anna Schecter in Studio 57 with us. Thank you for joining us.